Hello again. Welcome back to week 42 of year 4 of the Religious Education Initiative. This is day 3. We're continuing the Gospel of John. So last time we saw the Lord raise Lazarus from the dead, and the immediate response of the religious leaders we saw as well, and that was the plot to kill Jesus, lest the Romans bring down extreme force and violence upon Jerusalem and all of Judea to prevent what would surely look to them like a revolt in the making. We saw that nonetheless, all of Jerusalem was filled with excitement, wondering whether this Jesus, who had even raised the dead Lazarus back to life, would come to Jerusalem for the Passover. This time we will see Jesus do just that. So this is the beginning of chapter 12. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those at the table with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii, and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He kept the common purse and used to steal what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." When the great crowd of the Jews learned that he was there, they came not only because of Jesus, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priest planned to put Lazarus to death as well, since it was on account of him that many of the Jews were deserting and were believing in Jesus. The next day, the great crowd that had come to the festival heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel." Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, as it is written, "Do not be afraid, daughter of Zion. Look, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt." His disciples did not understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that these things had been written of him and had been done to him. So the crowd that had been with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to testify. It was also because they heard that he had performed this sign that the crowd went to meet him. The Pharisees then said to one another, "You see, you can do nothing. Look, the world has gone after him." Okay. Now, all of this, of course, we celebrated in the course of, we celebrated on Palm Sunday, and then again during Holy Week, remembering the washing and anointing of the Lord's feet. Now, there's a few things that are worth noting, though. First, we see Judas Iscariot make his turn finally towards betrayal. Out of jealousy, out of greed, because the money was spent on perfume that was just poured out on Jesus' feet, not sold and given to the poor, right? But Jesus basically tells Judas, be quiet, leave her alone, and says, and there's kind of an indication that not all of the perfume was used, perhaps that some of it was then used to anoint Jesus when he was buried. It's not entirely clear. He says she bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. And then says, "You'll always have the poor, but you won't always have me." It was pointed out, I saw pointed out recently, though, that according to the law, there were not supposed to be poor people among the people of God. If they had followed the law, everyone would have their property, their patrimony that would pass down from father to son. And even if a family became impoverished and had to sell it, every 50 years, on the year of Jubilee, it was supposed to come back to them. There were supposed to be allowances for the poor to glean in the fields of the wealthy, for the wealthy to leave their fields unworked every 7 years so that the poor could work it and care for themselves. There aren't supposed to be poor. This statement, "you always have the poor with you," is not just poverty is unresolvable. It's you're unwilling to do the things that would resolve poverty. It's an indictment, in a sense, of the the people of God, of the people of the covenant. And an indictment of us, because we still have the poor. And of course, this is a complicated subject, because it's actually very difficult to break the bonds of poverty. But there's always more that we can do in a different way than we do it. Anyway, and again, the principles of the 5 books of Moses, the principles of the Torah, have never actually been used. So, anyway, the chief priests are so determined to see Jesus done that they're willing to even kill Lazarus. And again, we have to disambiguate. Jews doesn't mean descendants of Judah. It's not an ethnic statement. This is simply the residents of Judea. So in verse 9, it should be, when the great crowd of the Judeans learned that Jesus was there in Bethany, they came to him, right? So then the great crowd hears that Jesus is coming. They hail him as the Messiah, according to the prophecies of Zechariah and Zephaniah and everything else. And then the Pharisees, look and see, okay, the crowd has gone away from the Pharisees and has come after the Lord. This is why in verse 11 it says, it was on account of Lazarus that many of the, again, Judeans, not Jews, were deserting the leaders of Judea, the Pharisees and Sadducees, the Sanhedrin, and were believing instead in Jesus. This is what's happening. They are seeing him both as a threat to the peace, but especially as a threat to their own authority with the people of Judea, where Jerusalem is. So, and I think that's enough to say for now. So God bless you all. Christ is risen. We'll see you next week.